Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something, well, really fundamental in IT audit and assurance. We do these audits, find things, make recommendations, but how do we actually make sure things change?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's like getting a health checkup. The diagnosis is important,
Yeah,
but it's the follow-up, the treatment plan that actually makes you better.
good analogy. So today we're putting on our instructor hats.
We're looking at ISACA's IT audit framework, specifically reporting standard 1402.
Follow-up activities.
Right. And the related reporting guidelines, 2402. We want to break down what they mean, practically speaking, and why they're so vital.
Okay, instructors, let's start at the top. Reporting Standard 1402, specifically Statement 1402.1. What's the absolute core message here?
The core requirement really is pretty straightforward. IT audit folks, practitioners like us, we have to monitor what management does about our findings.
Okay, monitoring. But it's more than just watching, right?
Oh, absolutely. It doesn't stop there. We also need to report on that progress. And periodically,
Report to who?
to those charged with governance, the board, the audit committee, the people overseeing the whole show.
Got it. So, as instructors, we stress this isn't optional. It's a formal expectation to keep the top brass informed. Why is that so critical?
Well, it boils down to accountability.
Yeah.
And transparency. The board needs assurance that these issues aren't just being swept under the rug.
Right.
And crucially, 1402.1 says our report needs a conclusion. We have to state whether management's plan and actions are appropriate and timely.
Timely. That word jumps out. As instructors, that feels important to highlight. It means audits aren't just looking back.
Exactly. They're meant to drive future improvements. If the action takes forever or never happens, the audit loses so much value.
Like finding a security hole.
Precisely. You find a critical vulnerability. You recommend a fix. But if that fix isn't applied quickly, the organization is still exposed. This standard makes sure we track that.
So we're confirming the recommendations actually lead to, well, better security, better processes, real improvement.
That's the goal, making sure those aha moments in the audit translate into tangible risk reduction and a stronger control environment.
Okay, that nails down the what's of the standard. Let's switch gears, put our instructor hats firmly on, and look at the how reporting guidelines 2402.
Right, the practical application.
Let's start with the purpose and importance. That's 2402.1 and 2402.2. What are the key teaching points?
So the first thing these guidelines do is define follow-up activity. It's about checking if management's actions on reported issues are adequate, effective, and, again, timely.
And it includes findings from external auditors, too.
Yes, that's an important point in 2402.1. It's comprehensive, and the purpose, according to 2402.2, is simple. Make sure the organization actually gets the benefit of the audit.
So we're teaching that follow-up isn't just admin. It's about ROI on the audit itself.
You got it. It's how you ensure the weaknesses get fixed, controls get stronger, risks go down.
Makes sense.
The guidelines also mention an alternative, though. Sometimes management might look at a finding and, well,
Decide not to fix it.
essentially, yes. They might formally accept the risk involved in not fixing it, maybe because of cost or complexity.
Okay, that's interesting. As instructors, we need to be clear. Accepting risk isn't always bad, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a calculated business decision.
Correct. But it has implications we need to track. Before we get deeper into that, though, let's touch on 2402.3, getting agreement and the management response. What's the lesson here?
This seems crucial for setting expectations.
Absolutely. The key thing to teach is that we, as practitioners, need to get clear agreement from the auditee. Agreement on the results and agreement on the action plan for fixing things.
Not just telling them, but getting their buy-in.
Exactly, and that plan needs to be documented. That's vital.
Why the emphasis on documenting it in the final report, with dates?
Accountability. It creates a clear benchmark. Everyone knows what's supposed to happen and by when. Guideline 2402.3 says the formal follow-up process actually starts once you have that agreement.
Okay, so that agreement is like the starting pistol. Clarity and commitment up front are non-negotiable.
Couldn't have said it better.
All right, now back to that situation where management doesn't take action. That's 2402.4. What do we need to teach about risk acceptance?
The main lesson is management can choose to accept risk. That's their prerogative. But our job doesn't end there.
We still have a role.
Definitely. We have a duty. It's mandatory to tell the board or whoever's charged with governance about those specific recommendations where management is accepting the risk instead of fixing it.
Wow. So even if management says, we're okay with this risk, that decision gets escalated. As instructors, that's a critical point.
It is, because governance has that ultimate oversight responsibility for the organization's overall risk profile. They need the full picture, including risks management decided to live with.
What if we, the auditors, disagree? We think the risk they're accepting is too high.
Good question. Guideline 2402.4 covers that too. There's an escalation path.
What does that look like practically?
Well, first you discuss it further up the chain, IT audit management, maybe executive management. If there's still disagreement and we feel the residual risk is unacceptable,
Then what?
then it goes formally to the board or the audit committee. They get the final say, essentially. It ensures major risk disagreements don't just get buried.
That's a really strong control. Ensures significant risks get top-level attention. Okay, let's move into the actual follow-up work. The procedures in 2402.5. What are the steps we need to outline as instructors?
Okay, 2402.5 lays out a kind of checklist. First, you need a time frame for management to respond. Document it.
Right, set a deadline.
Second, evaluate their response when it comes in. Is it actually going to fix the problem?
Yeah.
Third, verification. If they say they did something.
Check it.
Exactly, like looking at system settings, reviewing logs,
Yeah.
whatever proves the action was taken. Fourth, sometimes you might need to do more follow-up work, maybe some extra testing.
And what if the response isn't good enough or they haven't done what they promised? As instructors, what's the next step?
That's step 5. Escalate. Unsatisfactory responses or lack of action need to go up the management ladder, and importantly, also to governance.
Keeps the pressure on.
And finally, there needs to be a process for management to formally sign off on accepting the risk if, ultimately, they decide not to take corrective action.
Okay, so it's a structured process designed to make sure findings don't fall through the cracks. What about timing? 2402.6 talks about scheduling. How do we decide when to follow up?
As instructors, we'd emphasize it's risk-based. The guideline says the timing depends heavily on how significant the finding was.
Makes sense. A critical security flaw needs faster follow-up than a minor documentation issue.
Exactly. You look at the potential impact on the organization's goals if it's not fixed. High impact means quicker follow-up.
It's not just tacked on at the end, right?
No, 2402.6 is clear. Follow-up should be scheduled as an integral part of the whole audit plan. You also factor in things like how complex the fix is, how long management realistically needs, and you should definitely talk with management about timelines.
Okay, so it's planned, risk-based, and involves communication. Now, what about how much work is involved? The nature and extent covered in 2402.7.
Right. So typically, the auditee gets a deadline to tell us what they've done. Ideally, the guidelines suggest the original auditors should evaluate that response.
Why the original auditors?
They have the context. They understand the nuances of the finding and the recommendation. It's usually more efficient.
Okay.
They'll look at the response, get evidence documentation, maybe screenshots, whatever works to confirm the action. But, and this is key, if there's any doubt.
Doubt about what they're telling you.
Yeah, or doubt about whether the action they took actually worked, then we need to do more. Appropriate testing, maybe more detailed procedures.
So it could get, quote, involved.
For critical issues, absolutely. You might even need a dedicated follow-up engagement just to verify a really important fix was implemented properly. And if we're not satisfied with management's response, we have to report that opinion up the line too.
So the level of effort scales with the risk and the need for assurance. Makes sense. But what if immediate verification isn't practical? 402.8 mentions deferring follow-up. How does that work?
Yeah, sometimes management's response, maybe just a written explanation, seems sufficient given the finding's importance. If we judge professionally that the action sounds right,
You might not test it right away.
we might defer the actual verification. We'd schedule it to be checked during the next regular audit of that area or system. It avoids doing tiny, separate verification checks constantly, but still ensures it gets looked at eventually.
Okay, so it's about professional judgment and efficiency without losing track of the issue. How should management provide these responses? 230.2.9 talks about the form.
The guideline strongly prefers written responses.
Why written?
It reinforces management's responsibility, creates a clear audit trail, makes tracking easier. If you get a verbal response, you should document it and try to get management to confirm it, maybe via email.
And evidence.
Ideally, yes. If they can provide proof, like a configuration file, a policy document with their response, that's even better. And for really high-risk stuff or fixes that take a long time, we should be asking for periodic updates. Keep tabs on it.
Right, so formal documentation is best practice for accountability. What about findings from others, like external auditors? Does 2402 cover those too?
It does. Guideline 2402.1 so explicitly says our follow-up process should include tracking actions on recommendations from external auditors or, regulators, other partners.
So it's a central tracking mechanism for all required actions.
That's the idea, a holistic view of what needs fixing across the board.
Okay, nearly there. How is all this follow-up activity finally reported? Guideline 2402.11.
Right, the reporting loop closes here. A report on the status of all the agreed actions needs to go to the right management levels, and crucially, up to governance, the audit committee again.
And it should highlight things that aren't done yet.
Absolutely. Unimplemented recommendations must be included. And there's another point. What if you find out later that something they said was implemented actually wasn't?
Uh-oh.
Yeah. If a later audit finds that, we have to report the discrepancy, communicate the real current status, and likely get a new or revised action plan from management.
So it really is a continuous cycle.
Yeah.
Audit, recommend, agree, follow up, verify, report, and repeat if necessary.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Standard 1402 and Guidelines 2402 provide that essential structure. They ensure audit insights don't just sit on a shelf, but actually drive improvement and provide assurance to leadership.
So wrapping up this instructor session, the big takeaway is that follow-up isn't an afterthought. It's absolutely core to the value of IT audit. This continuous monitoring and reporting, it builds accountability.
Exactly. It ensures the organization learns and improves. It gives the board and management confidence that risks are being managed effectively. Without this follow-up engine, audits are just snapshots in time.
It really forces us to think about closing that loop, making sure our work leads to real, tangible change. A good question for everyone listening is, how robust are your follow-up processes? Do they truly drive improvement and build that trust?
And if you want to go deeper, we really encourage you to explore the full ISACA ITAF framework. These pieces fit into a much larger interconnected picture of effective IT audit and assurance practices. It's well worth the read.